time, what I'd like to do is to introduce Dr. Colin Palmer. Dr. Palmer wrote the introduction for the book Capitalism and Slavery. Dr. Palmer is a professor in the history department at City University of New York. He's a professor also at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Dr. Palmer received his BA from the University College of the West Indies, London, England, his master's and PhD from the University of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. He's a proud recipient of many honors and fellowships in graduate education. Dr. Palmer is the author of several publications, including The First Passage, Africans in the Americas, 1502 to 1617, Oxford University Press, and Passageways, An Interpretive History of Black America. Dr. Palmer has also refereed and reviewed numerous articles on people of colonial Latin America and the Caribbean, including the African American population. Dr. Palmer is also a member of DARE's Educational Board and has served on several committees. Please, would you, along with me, warmly welcome Dr. Palmer to today's symposium.
Thank you very much. I wear several identities today. First, I represent the Board of Governors of the University of North Carolina Press. I have served on that board for the last 7 years. I am also here as someone who has spent the better part of 2 decades studying the history of blacks in the Americas. Hence, I have a particular interest in and admiration for capitalism and slavery. And I'm here also as someone who has had a profound admiration for Dr. Williams, both as a scholar and as a person, and certainly as perhaps the most distinguished politician that the Caribbean has produced. About a year ago, the University of North Carolina Press asked whether I would recommend the republication of Capitalism and Slavery, and I was pleased to dash off an endorsement of that particular suggestion. And a few weeks later, I was flattered when the press asked if I would write an introduction to the new edition. And you have that. The notion of a Jamaican doing this is one that I'm sure will exercise your consciousness. But the point is, as I pointed out in the introduction, when Herc Williams was asked to, or when he examined the dust jacket, or at least when they discussed with him what might be put in the dust jacket, he indicated that he didn't want to be identified as a Trinidadian. He wanted to be identified as a West Indian. And I think that has remained one of his enduring characteristics. Another way, of course, is to celebrate it as one of the most influential books published in the 20th century. That particular book, Capitalism and Slavery, inaugurated a watershed in the history of the Caribbean. In fact, when it appeared in 1944, on November 11th, by the way, Williams changed the course of the debate on the place of the Caribbean in the making of England, of the English society and economy. It changed the course of the debate on the impact of slavery and the slave trade, not on the Caribbean, but on those individuals and those societies that benefited economically from that particular enterprise. Now, you must remember, certainly, that this is 50 years ago, and historical scholarship has changed.
And for a young West Indian, he was about 33 years old then, I believe, to raise these kinds of major questions represented a new boldness, a new intellectual pugnacity that, again, remained the hallmark of this remarkable person from Trinidad. Williams not only showed the enduring significance of the profits derived from slavery and the slave trade, the enduring significance for the evolution and development of the English economy, but he called into question the reasons for the abolition of slavery. Hitherto, the argument, as you all know, was predicated upon a humanitarian thrust, and Williams suggested, among other things, that the humanitarian movement was driven by economic considerations. And he also, for the first time, recognized, certainly in historical scholarship, the role that slaves themselves played in the emancipation process. As he very elegantly put it, one has to recognize that it was also emancipation from below. But for our purposes this morning, what is significant is that he underscored the centrality of slavery and the slave trade to the European economies. And that was a new kind of approach to a very complex problem. Since 1944, of course, historians have tried to chip away at the central contentions, unsuccessfully, I think. But that is unimportant. What is important is that he defined the terrain. He defined the direction of the debate. And he raised questions that future historians could ill afford to ignore. And in his wranglings with the press, as you will read in the introduction, Williams refused to budge from his positions. The book was, some of the people at the press wanted to rename the book A History of Slavery. And Williams was adamant that was not what he set out to do. He set out to examine the interrelationships between the metropolitan power and the colonial islands, but in a fresh and imaginative way. And the significance of this classic work, among its many virtues, is that it continues to provoke. It continues to engage. It is timeless. In fact, there can be no resolution of the questions that he raised. No definitive resolution, although many people in the last 50 years have made careers trying to demonstrate how wrong Eric Williams was in 1944. But the interesting thing is that Williams's work will endure, and these challenges are not likely to have the same kind of timelessness. So, as we celebrate the republication of this book this morning, let us recall that it was published 50 years ago at a time when the questions that you raised had never been raised before and had never been addressed with the same degree of intellectual rigor, intellectual pugnacity, and careful research. And people like me were in fact inspired by this particular scholar and historian and politician. When I was a student at UWI, we used to marvel at Dr. Williams's intellectual productivity. This man could write a book in 30 days. When some of our professors took years to produce similar works. I don't know how he did it, maybe you know, how he was able to lock himself away from the problems of governing Trinidad and focus on intellectual works of distinction. So let us not be bogged down today with showing how wrong Williams was, if indeed we could show that. Let us celebrate the enduring contribution of a man of superior intellect, a man who raised tough and enduring questions, and a man who changed, by this little book, the terms of the debate regarding the place of the Caribbean in the larger world systems and the place of blacks in generating their own liberation in the Caribbean. I think I've probably said enough. The introduction tries to flesh out my arguments a little bit more, and it tries to reconstruct the conditions surrounding the publication of the book. The UNC Press, of course, was quite courageous in '44 to bring that book out. Let us celebrate that as well. It was a Southern press in a climate that was fundamentally different, maybe not so fundamentally different from 1994, but I think we need to give the press its due in this regard, and we also need to congratulate the press, I think, for recognizing the enduring significance of that book. It is, of course, my pleasant, very pleasant duty to launch the book on behalf of the press and to lovingly and respectfully present the first hardcover copy to Erica Williams Connell. And I do this on behalf of all of us. I do it on behalf of the generations of human beings who have been influenced and shaped by this remarkable volume. And I do it with the confidence that in another 50 years, this book will be as significant as it is today. This book will continue to live. And as I have referred to it in the introduction, it is a historical treasure. And I want to present it to you.
Good morning. I'd just like to accept this book on behalf of my father, who is unfortunately not here to do it in person. But as I tell my daughter, his granddaughter, almost weekly, I wish that her father were here to see her. And she says quite categorically and quite emphatically, "Oh, but he is, Mom. He's seeing us. He's right here. He knows what you're doing, and he knows what I'm doing." From a 7-year-old, I am absolutely astounded. And as Dr. Palmer said, hopefully in another 50 years, someone else will be, or the university, I should say the University of North Carolina Press, will be republishing this book, and someone else, perhaps not him, will be presenting it, maybe to my father's granddaughter, Erin. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer, and thank you, Erica.